You know, for most of human history, we've been trying to figure out how to grow enough food to feed the world's population. Literally, we've been living in a food-scarce world. And when you talk to people, most people don't believe that even hunger in America is a solvable problem. Because for most of human history, it wasn't. Until now.
Members of the National Guard are being deployed across the country.
17 million more Americans could now face hunger because of the coronavirus pandemic.
More families are struggling to afford basic necessities.
There are these students making a big impact. Could they be the ones to tackle this crisis?
Tonight, young people across this country answering the call.
I think we basically had a 1 or 2 month window that we had to start this project, and if we missed that window, I think this would be a different story.
Every college student across the country was feeling the same thing, and it wasn't just hopelessness, it was feeling completely powerless.
A lot of college kids were in a similar situation of wanting to find a way to go out and help, but then not being able to leave our houses. And I almost think that this sense of not knowing, enabled people to do things that they wouldn't have otherwise.
I distinctly remember there's one image that really was the launching of this. I think it was the Pittsburgh Food Bank.
Hundreds of cars lining up for the Greater Pittsburgh Food Bank before it opened yesterday.
And it was this drone shot going over a freeway pass with miles-long lines for cars, and more than half the people were turned away that day.
You know, I had a lady here yesterday with 4 little kids in the car, and she says, I'm a waitress and I don't have any food.
Millions of children rely on their school lunches, and all of our schools closed. Those lunches don't get replaced for those students.
One of our little 12-year-old girls, it was about 10 o'clock in the morning, and this little girl fell out of her desk, passed out, scared me to death. I ran down there and to the room, and we called an ambulance. And when we revived her, we found out that she hadn't eaten in 6 days. And her last lunch was the school lunch on Tuesday. This is Monday morning at 10.
The guidance was, what can we do? It's like, you just got to stay home, and that's the most you can do. And you honestly felt like pretty powerless and kind of helpless. And when we then saw that that crisis was happening at our local food bank, and they were going to have to close their doors if they couldn't get more food, that's when this thing became really real for us.
My mom was sewing masks for people because there was a mask shortage. There was this PPO shortage. And so the goal at the beginning was to just help in some way.
The most amazing thing that sort of confused us, and it almost didn't know how to make sense of it, was at the same time that we were reading about these mile-long lines at food banks and these food shortages, grocery stores being out of food, we were simultaneously reading articles about farmers being forced to throw away millions and millions of pounds of food every single day. There's footage of millions of bananas going to waste, hundreds of thousands of watermelons being smashed, millions of gallons of milk being poured down the drain. And at some point, we were like, you know what, we need to do something. We can't just sit here. We just said, let's connect one farm to one food bank. I'm James, I'm a college student. I'm gonna get hung up on, how did you get my number? Who gave you this? Delete me from this list.
I just called a school bus company and was like, can we move food on the buses? They said no.
No surplus, not here.
And I hopped on Google and for 4.5 hours wrote down every farm that I could find that had been written about.
How is this possible? 75 farmers and not a single one of them has had surplus food. Talking to all these farmers, they don't have anything, and yet I'm reading of this massive surplus.
Oh no, it's not just that this is hard, but we were actually totally wrong about this whole thing.
I mean, it just wasn't even close. Just when we were losing hope on this idea, that was when the problem started to get worse.
1/3 of college students are food insecure. I guarantee you, people don't know that.
So I'm a sophomore at UC Berkeley. and I'm studying like super niche major, honestly. Like I've never seen it anywhere else. It's called Society and Environment. My background is the reason I am trying to pursue anything in this environmental field. Growing up, my mom worked in the fields. You go in before sunrise and you come out after sunset. You know, they worked hard, and then there wasn't that on the table. We would walk in the neighborhood of like where there was apartments, and all the apartments had like giant dumpsters. So we would go like look through the dumpster, and like, cause I was small, she'd be like, you go in there. I would, like, if there was like unopened stuff, we would just take it, or like clothes or whatever. So it was always like, what is this system? Like, what the heck, you know?
I mean, food is, right, the most basic element for life. And the reality is that in this country, 37 million Americans don't have access to sufficient and consistent nutritious food. And I think that is like a root of a lot of our problems. I saw this article in the New York Times, and it focused in on one farmer specifically.
When you close all the restaurants, you change the whole supply chain.
He literally had to take tractors and dig a giant ditch and bury 6 million pounds of onions.
The supply chain is broken, guys. Nobody wants those onions.
If there's any chance that this idea has any hope of working, you know, we're 2 days into this, no one has replied, it is this guy. This is do or die. Picked up the phone, dialed him, and I think he just picks up the phone. Shay Meyer's here.
That was a really scary moment, actually. Very frustrating, very scary, and we usually know how to pivot. And in that setting, we didn't know what to do. It was just scary.
So what was interesting at the beginning when we were calling people is that we were talking to really small farms who might have been actually more successful because there was more local buying at that time. And Shay Meyers was the one who told us, yes, at commercial farms, at large farms, we are struggling.
We had 2 million pounds of onions. We didn't know if we were gonna be able to find a home. James and Farmlink called, and I said, come get them, we've got 2 million pounds.
You know, we go pick up that U-Haul, we strap this bed sheet, you know, duct taped onto the back of the side of the car. It says Farmlink. We pick up those age of students, we drive to the farm, we deliver them to the food bank.
After we got in touch with Shay, things happened very quickly. I mean, the first 2 deliveries, both with us driving the U-Haul for the eggs and the delivery from Shay, came back to back.
My name is Martha Barajas. I'm a longtime resident of Compton for 50 years. This is how I feed my family. And not only my family, I feed my neighbors and thousands of cars.
And now the produce is high in the grocery stores, you know, so to be able to come here and to receive this food is wonderful.
We had so much to learn so quickly. So I remember we got connected with another charitable food organization, and we said, hey, we see this problem that's happening across the country. We know demand has doubled. This is our organization. We're moving all this food. Is there anything that we can do to help? Because we know you guys understand this space. And I remember them kind of like looking at us, you know, like almost like laughing.
And they said, you guys can't help. Like, just keep, you know, just keep hanging out of your houses, worry about your families. We got this covered. I'm sorry, but you don't have it all handled. So if there's any small way we can help, even, you know, just locally, just let us know. But we were totally kind of brushed off.
I mean, it was a national organization with serious resources. You know, if they wanted to, they could snap their fingers and move all of this food. But yeah, they're slow to responding to it. And it wasn't just one, it was multiple organizations. Good for you guys for doing something, but you know, we'll take it from here. It really pissed me off. I remember leaving that call angry but motivated as ever that we had something to prove.
And I don't think anybody had any idea of what was going to happen next.
This is World News Tonight with David Muir. Finally tonight here, the children teaching us what it means to be America strong.
So someone just texted, you guys are on the world news. Immediately, everything just blew up.
ABC World News Tonight is the most watched newscast in the entire world.
Tonight, young people across this country answering the call. College students starting Farmlink, connecting farmers with food banks.
Students from all around the country started responding to our little website.
Hi Farmlink, my name is Jane.
I'm Alex. I'm Annika Patel. I'm a sophomore at Bates College.
I grew up food insecure and wanted to make sure other people didn't go food insecure.
Suddenly we had a team of 100, 150 people.
Hauling thousands of farmers a day.
We're sending food from Oregon to California, all the way out to Florida. We're getting food from the East Coast.
All the adults in the world haven't figured out how to end world hunger, but these college students aren't willing to take no for an answer. Like, that gets people's attention.
I remember we had this one goal. Let's move 1 million pounds of food. And if we could do that, I mean, that would be amazing. And within 3 weeks, we'd moved 1 million pounds of food.
In a day and a half, we had $150,000 in our friend's bank account. Like, holy.
This is something much bigger than any of us realized.
We love it. Good night.
Now this is the crew I've got to work for me, and you talk about pains in the rear, we got them. And that man right there, I hadn't seen him do a day's work in 6 months, so I'd like to get him on camera for sure. How you doing, JR? I'm doing good right now. We're in the northeastern part of Oklahoma. We're probably 70 or 80 miles from Tulsa, but we're basically a rural area. Now that the groceries have gotten higher, our crowd's getting bigger, and it's gaining every day. We're getting more now than we were 2 months ago, just because of the price of food.
Millions of families were still flooding a charitable food system that was never designed for a crisis. You know, at the time, we'd moved 1 million pounds of food, but the thing was, you know, to really change things, we'd have to move 100 million pounds of food. And it was like, how are we gonna do that? Because our whole team, we're in school right now, half our team is in finals. Hey, you know, it's been a week, we haven't moved any food. Hey, it's been 2 weeks, we haven't moved any food. Is this really gonna kind of work? It definitely settles in. Hey, we have an important role to play here, and we need to step it up, and we sort of need to put, you know, school and life and all those other things on hold, and this is what we need to be focused on right now. And it was like, yeah, just a cascade of people who all of a sudden jumped ship and said they're all in.
The biggest thing that became interesting to me was the logistical processes that broke down as the agricultural supply chain became untethered, whether it's going to go to waste in the field, in transition, while it's being moved to a grocery store, when it's at the grocery store. We want to make sure that Farmlink can capture any of that waste.
Jordan and Caroline were like superheroes. They were flying, remember I described that potato deal that took like 30 hours for us to coordinate? They were coordinating like 40 of those every week.
We worked with the Navajo Nation, and we worked in Bakersfield, in Brooklyn. We did a deal in Hawaii. We were all over.
Yeah, I got this one guy on the line. I don't remember exactly where the farm he was from, but I think it was around 3,000 pounds of potatoes. This food's gonna go off and literally help thousands of people, and that was kind of like that. Oh shoot, like this is the impact that this organization can have.
The missing link is just the transportation. It's the logistics to get it there, and that's what we can do. I mean, I think what we started to realize is, well, like all of Farmlink, all the students, we were united by one mission. People were there for a lot of different reasons. I remember one student, Joe, and he's like literally the most lively, like, kid you've ever met. Like, just, and I remember, you know, we've known him now for like 4 months, and we're at our end of ceremony thing, and, you know, everyone's sharing, and I remember, like, Mark, you know, he's, you know, starts speaking, and he's so positive. Hey, everyone. And he explained to us that just a few months before that, his dad passed away from COVID. And he explains, like, this was the only thing that kept him going, was Farmlink. Like, instantly, like, just bawling, crying.
My dad was a believer in helping people. He came from a very rough background himself, and he always believed in paying it forward in any way he could. And, you know, it's something he instilled in me, and it was a way feeling closer to my dad and also fighting back against what took him from me.
Even the people in the most pain right now were willing to do something to help others. And I think for a lot of people, and myself included, like, Joe sharing that with us was just proof of how strong the bonds are.
One by one, as the world seemed to return to normal, we were seeing all these organizations that had popped up during the last 2 years start to go away.
A lot of people came together to support healthcare workers and first responders. So my line of questioning was, is this it, or are you gonna go the distance?
People kept asking us, oh, the pandemic's over, there won't be any more surplus food, right? And it's like, no, that's completely wrong. This is literally just the beginning.
It feels like we have one of the biggest opportunities to solve a major issue that I could possibly imagine, and it's right in front of us. Every single year, 30 to 40% of the food that's grown, that's quality, nutritious food, goes to waste. Doesn't even make it to the grocery stores, doesn't even make it to your table.
These 7 grains of rice represent the average amount of food someone eats in a lifetime. And then this is how much food goes to waste in America each year.
This was not a problem caused by the pandemic. These were systemic issues that were exacerbated by those conditions. And people are really starting to talk about it.
This is a tomato I bought from the grocery store. And here are 3 tomatoes that would have been thrown away on a farm. Can you spot the difference? This one here is a little too mushy. This one has a small dent in it. And this one, well, suppliers cut the contract last minute, so it has nowhere to go. And it's not just one tomato here and there. It's a whole system designed to throw away 30% of all food.
We're growing enough food to feed every person on this planet. We're growing enough food to feed the population nearly 2 times over. And I think when we started to realize, wow, this is much bigger than just the pandemic, than just responding to the crisis, we needed to bring in the big guns.
My name is Luis Fernando Yepes.
Where are you from?
I was born in Ciudad Obregón, Sonora, Mexico. I decided to join Farmlink because I believe with my whole heart that we can create a system which will allow everyone to have access to food, to make sure that we give aid to communities that have been neglected for decades. I grew up with a lot of people that even working all day, every day, they couldn't make enough to eat. I grew up with kids that their idea of lunch was to go to the fruit trees and, taking a mango to eat. I see food recovery as an arrow that is breaking new ground as it hits space. And in the Farmlink project, I saw the future. I saw the Farmlink project being the tip of that arrow.
There are people who are experts in their domain who are choosing to join Farmlink because they view it as this movement for change. We have Mike Meyer, this Texas farmer who knows U.S. agriculture like the back of his hand, and Luis Yepes, who has spent his entire life thinking about how we can rescue food throughout the supply chain. And what unites everyone is still what united us at the start. It's this feeling that we are doing something really special and something new and urgent and important.
Mike sent us this memo, and you start to go through it, and it shows us one county in Texas, and population this many people, percent food insecure, this many percent. All of a sudden, you finish this math, you follow it, and for $75,000, we can solve hunger in that county. And I remember Mike just going, we're gonna do this block by block. We're gonna do this county by county and state by state, and we actually can bring an end to this.
This was just a project to help our local food bank. And now it's grown into something that has the capacity to feed millions of people every single day with dignity.
But we can only do it if we can all work together. It's gonna take a movement of people.
Farmlink.
Farmlink. Want to give the Farmlink project a check for $15,000.
Oh my God. I've seen food waste in my entire career, and this group is tapping into something really special.
大学生が立ち上げたプロジェクト、Farmlink.
Just this week, more than 600,000 avocados distributed at FDR Park.
1 million pounds of food. Farmers and food banks telling them they are grateful.
People don't think students are really capable of anything. I'll leave this to the adults.
As of yesterday, we've saved 60 million pounds of food.
And I think what we really believed was that in times of crisis, it's young people who step up to lead.
More applause for that wonderful film, Abundance, everyone. Woo! I am so excited to talk to the leaders behind the work you just saw. I get to introduce Ben Collier, the CEO and co-founder of the Farmlink project. Round of applause. And Mike Meyer, the head of advocacy at the Farmlink project and a fifth-generation cattle rancher. And looking the part. I'm so excited to be up here with these two gentlemen. Thank you for all of this work. I just need you both to know how grateful I am because it's so inspiring. So I want to start with you, Ben, and just, you know, we saw some of it in the film, but can you talk about the early days of the Farmlink project and, you know, what you were trying to overcome during this very awful pandemic?
Sure. And if anyone in the back is looking for seats, there are a ton that just opened up right up here. Please join us. Before I start, can everyone raise their hand for a second? Everyone raise your hand, please. Can you keep your hand up if you've been here for an hour, or 3 hours, or 6 hours? Because our wonderful moderator has been hosting this entire session for 9 hours. And I think that's crazy.
I'm not sure I believe him, but I also want to shout out to Mode in the back and all of the work that they've been doing for more hours than I have been here. Anyway, Ben, now I'm going to ask you a totally different question. The early days of Farmlink, you know, getting this project off the ground during the pandemic, tell me about that process. And I mean this in the best way, were you scared? I was scared when Bernie, my co-founder, and I started Food Tank.
I don't think we were scared because we had no idea what we were getting into. And when we first started calling farmers, our whole goal, as I think James said, was truly to connect one farm with one food bank. And so when we finally got through to Shay and to that egg farmer the next day, we thought, great, this is what success at Farmlink looks like. And then a month later, we'd moved 1 million pounds, and we thought, great, this could be what success looks like. And now today, we've rescued 200 million pounds of food. And I think only in the last few months have I started to really appreciate just how big I think this really could be.
Yeah.
And now it scares me, but it is coming from a really good place.
That's great. Thank you for sharing that. Can you talk a little bit more about the challenges at the very start of the pandemic and what that meant for Farmlink?
Sure. How many people here, just nod, understand the difference between a food bank and a food pantry? Because I didn't. And a food bank, there are hundreds of food banks around the country, and they are basically distribution centers. They can take tens, hundreds of thousands of pounds of food, they mix it into smaller quantities, and then they send those to community-level organizations like food pantries, church groups, after-school programs, nonprofits of any form. And what we didn't know entering this space was the food banking level is surprisingly territorial and regionalized and isolative. And what that meant was, at the start of the Farmlink project, people didn't really want to work with Farmlink. The first time I spoke with a food bank, we had access to 30 truckloads of cucumbers that were going to go to waste. It was a pickling farmer, and nobody was turning cucumbers into pickles in May of 2020. And we spoke with them, and they said, a local food bank is taking 5 truckloads. Can you find a home for the other 25? We said, absolutely, and then the local food bank called and said, this is our farmer, this is our territory. You can donate to us, but you need to back off. And they then called the farmer with me on the phone and said, these kids are scamming you, and hung up. And 1 million pounds of cucumbers went to waste. And that is not a reflection of how I see the food banking space today, but it is indicative of why there's a lot of tension and what we came into. And today, that industry is so much more collaborative than it was 3 years ago, and it still has so much room to grow. But if we're gonna succeed, it means being able to work with every food bank, because that's the only way we can really reach every community. And that's been our focus since that cucumber story.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that. I know these obstacles are hard to talk about, but we learn so much from the problems, at least I do. Mike, I want to hear your story. How did you get involved with Farmlink?
Okay, so y'all heard I'm a 5th-generation rancher right down the road in Marlin, Texas. Everybody will describe me as I am a student of big ag and big charity. And I was in the Feeding America Network when the young people of Farmlink started. I was the general manager of the Texas Produce Co-op, which was the largest produce co-op in the Feeding America Network. James called me in the very early part, and he said, this is what we're trying to do. And I said, fantastic. I said, we need everybody we can get. We have never seen anything like this before in commercial ag or in this country. So come on. I might have been one of 3 friendly voices to this group in the hunger fighting charity complex, okay? So I watched them grow. They have some incredibly brilliant foundation principles, and I hope that Ben shares them with y'all. But if we don't get to it, stop us when we get out of this room. And about 1.5 years ago, I was like, I think I've accomplished everything I wanted to in Texas. It's getting kind of small. Let's go to Farmlink and let's see how big we can really get this thing going. And we've done okay. So.
Okay, yeah, you've done okay. Better than okay. Mike, I want to ask you, were you skeptical of these young people?
Oh, no, okay. I have said this before. They are incredibly brave. My youngest son was an athlete at one of the Texas universities. Those kids who were probably so incredibly well-nourished were sent home and said hide. And these group of young people, I have described it as before, that it wasn't quite like they charged hell with a bucket of water, but it wasn't that far off. And those of us that were in the hunger fighting charity fight already, we were paid to be there. And these young people just went after it.
I love it. These incredible young people are so brave. And so, Ben, obviously abundance covers the early days of Farmlink. Where are y'all now with everything? What's happening?
The last couple years have been really exciting, and there's been a ton of growth. We finished this story that you just saw a little over 1 year ago. We just recovered our 100 millionth pound of food, and last year alone, we recovered 110 million pounds of food. And that is, no, clap later, it's fine. But it's still just scratching the surface of what's possible. And
those of you waiting in line for beans, did you guys know that there is so much surplus of many types of produce that it literally can't be sold? Because if it's sold, it'll tank the price of that produce. For instance, right now, we know there are 100 million pounds of surplus potatoes in North America. We think there are 1 billion pounds of surplus potatoes in North America. And those can't be sold. And so what happens is, well, the USDA, the federal program, has certain funds allocated towards, in moments where this industry says, help, we're underwater, buying that food from the farmers and expecting them to figure out a way to donate it, to figure out a way to process it, turn those potatoes into flour, or sometimes it just goes to waste. And what we saw that there's never existed in the history of food banks is the ability to take tens of millions, hundreds of millions of pounds of a single type of surplus produce and effectively get that to communities around the country. Last July, we got to show this film in Congress, which was the second most impressive crowd we've ever shown it in front of. And there, the National Association of State Departments of Agriculture, NASDA, I think NASA is here, but NASDA saw it, Mike presented to them, and the West Virginia Department of Agriculture followed up with us. And they said, we have 12 growers who just lost their contracts. 12 growers, 40 million apples, nowhere to go. We have the money to help the farmers harvest the food. We have no way of getting it to communities around the country. Can you help us? So the local food banks got their fill. They recovered about 50 of the 400 truckloads of apples. I'm a little bit rounding here. And then they said, Farmlink, you're up. And over the next 6 weeks, we delivered almost 40 million apples to 120 different communities around 20 different states. And it was 3 times larger than the largest moment of collective produce recovery that the food banking industry has ever taken on. And what that shows is that this industry is capable of so much more than it's historically been able to take on. So these huge moments of produce surplus, it's almost been a given for decades that that just goes to waste. And what we want to show with Feeding America, with the hundreds of non-Feeding America food banks, and the thousands of community-level organizations that can be a part of this as well, is if we can create the connectivity between all of them, the funds to get the food there, and the transportation to actually deliver it, that food will get there. And that is what we believe Farmlink's greatest purpose can be for this industry.
It's amazing. Round of applause for that. To create this incredible opportunity, you needed folks like Mike. And Mike, I want to ask you what it will take to scale this work.
Okay, so to scale this work, right? So and to give you an idea exactly what the scale was, right? We needed to move 350 truckloads of apples in about 5 weeks. Okay, if you just back the math out, we need to move about 10 loads a day.
10 loads is almost 500,000 pounds of apples.
500,000 pounds a day. Now, in the scheme of things for commercial ag, that is actually a small number, okay? So for commercial ag, it's like 10 loads a day, no problem. We'll do that by 9:30. Okay, now, to talk about the hunger fighting charity complex, specifically the food banks for a moment. The local food banks told the West Virginia Department of Ag, we'll take 3 loads a week. We needed to move 10 loads a day. So one of the beautiful principles of Farmlink is that we do not stop at the food bank. We go to those hunger fighting charities. We arrange distributions with them. If you go to the Farmlink website, you will see another film. If you Google National Public Radio, they did a news report on this, okay, and what is going on there. Okay, so, and now, so to scale, the other thing with the local hunger fighting charities, they don't usually get produce like this, straight from the orchard, straight from the farms. It usually goes through a fairly convoluted distribution system, so that when it gets to them, it may only have 2 or 3 days worth of shelf life left. And we want really fresh produce getting to those that we serve. So the model is incredibly efficient. And then the other thing is Farmlink charges no fees to any charity. It may surprise y'all that in the food banking network, fees are charged to the local pantries for the food they hand out. And those local pantries have to fundraise to be able to buy that food. Farmlink, we say, here it comes. The freshest produce you can imagine. When do you want it? We will get it there, and it'll be free. So if you were running those pantries, you would say, I'm ready, let's go.
Yeah.
So scaling is actually pretty easy.
That's great. That's great to hear. Thank you for that. I wanted, and Ben already talked about this a little bit earlier, the partnerships that have happened because of this and sort of the allies that have come aboard. Anyone unusual that you didn't expect who's become part of the Farmlink family?
Unusual? Well, one of the coolest opportunities was 6 months in, I was a college student. Chipotle reaches out to us and says, we want to do a roundup campaign for you. So anyone who buys a burrito, they can round up to the next dollar for 2 months. And if they do, that money goes to Farmlink. And just like that, $1.5 million came our way. And they've done that every year since then. And yeah, for Chipotle. And on top of that, we've had support from a lot of the biggest farms and growers and distributors within this industry. And then so many of the partners that are adjacent to food. I mean, Google and the Google Food Lab. Kroger has been a huge supporter. In the first year, Uber, which has a trucking part of Uber, same deal. You say this truck needs to go from here to here, and it needs to be refrigerated. They connect you with a driver. Uber had this Move What Matters campaign where they said, anything you move on our platform for the next $1 million, free. And we didn't really know at that point exactly how to do the logistics as well as possible. So it gave us this sandbox within which to learn a lot. And I think without a lot of those partners, seeing Farmlink, seeing the story that it was and the opportunity it could be, especially early on in the pandemic when so many people were just looking for something to cheer for,
Sure.
a bunch of kids taking on hunger was a pretty good bet.
Yeah, absolutely. Please, you said, go.
Okay, so I'm going to brag about the Farmlink folks real quick. They work with all the national charities and the international charities. Who are they? Salvation Army, World Vision, Feeding America, Feed the Children, Midwest Food Bank, Society of St. Andrews. So the young people at Farmlink are changing and for the positive and creating a very collaborative spirit amongst the hunger-fighting charities. And these hunger-fighting charities are starting to look beyond their silos.
Thank you so much. I want to talk about some of those big charities because, and so many of them, I love them. I love a lot of the folks who are working at big organizations in the anti-hunger space and the food recovery space. But there are challenges because they are big and they might look at you as this big competitor now. And I wonder how you navigate these, what can be very tense relationships.
Very delicately. Feeding America is the largest charity in the country, or top 3. And there's 200 Feeding America food banks. And like I said, there are hundreds of non-Feeding America food banks. If we're going to reach everybody we can, food needs to go to Feeding America and outside of that network at the same time. And so for us, it's been really important as we build these relationships to acknowledge where are there restrictive, isolative, combative relationships that exist, and how can we show Farmlink's only intention is to support these existing organizations.
Yeah.
And so actually, we pivoted a year into Farmlink. We were being given a lot of money at the start of the pandemic to buy food from farmers and then donate that to food banks. And what we realized was we were paying 6 cents, 8 cents, 10 cents a pound for food. Every food bank in the country has a budget to pay for their fresh produce because they don't have the capacity to source from these huge farms in the way that Farmlink can. And so we couldn't confirm that Farmlink wasn't just buying the food banks were otherwise going to have access to. And so a year in, we said, all right, we're pivoting. If a farmer can sell their food anywhere, to a food bank, to someone that's going to turn their strawberries into popsicles, great. And if they can't, which happens to 100 billion pounds of food a year, we want to be the safety net below that. And so I spoke with a farmer that grows tomatoes for Chipotle. They spent $15,000 to throw away a truckload of tomatoes. And so if Farmlink can take away the transportation costs, the dump fees, make that zero, and then allow them to access the tax benefits that come when they donate that food, there's thousands to over $10,000 of a financial swing there, and we're not competing with food banks.
Yeah.
And I think working as much as we can to ensure that whatever we're doing is additive to all of these communities.
Yeah.
It's just really driven us to be as good as we can be.
I love that you use the word additive, and that's what you've all been doing, and it's been so wonderful to watch this story unfold. I wonder what your thoughts are around how you see, you know, young people continuing to change this movement, this food recovery movement, this, you know, donation charity movement. How do you both, and maybe you go first and sort of see what, you know, talk about what you've seen, and then we'll turn
Yeah,
it
so clearly I'm not the typical farm linker. Just so y'all know, if you're doing the math, I'm 3 times the average age of a farm linker. Okay, so, but Farmlink has this wonderful college and university intern program, and we bring in 30 to 50 young people every semester. And they can either kind of go work in the food pipeline or the policy pipeline or the advocacy pipeline or sustainability, and they can kind of decide and do that. And then Farmlink has a few paid intern positions, and they get placed. So to keep the young people involved, Farmlink has this very aggressive outreach program to colleges and universities. And if you know young people, you should encourage them. Because again, I would say we need every smart person we can get.
We've had 700 students involved with Farmlink since 2020. And thanks. And there's so many stories of students that said, I wanted to go do this, and now I'm going to do that, whether it's in sustainability or policy or food itself. And all of them now go into the world with a deeper understanding of climate and food and hunger and the needs and intricacies in between.
Yeah.
And we talk about a lot how we think the greatest legacy of Farmlink, beyond the food that we move, is going to be the impact that those hundreds and soon to be thousands of students are going to go on to have, being in the world, knowing how important and how much potential there is to make a change in this space.
It's such an inspiration, and you've done so much good work to inspire other young people. I'm wondering what advice you have for them. I mean, you sort of described it, but what advice do you both have for young people who are, maybe it's not food recovery, maybe it's another issue that they feel very passionately about in food and agriculture. What's your advice to just, you know, get started?
I can go. We revisited Farmlink's values a few months ago, and this was a long process. The whole point is to come to something that actually feels like it was built by the team, and so it naturally took us forever. But the first one is forever students, and the whole premise around that is we asked so many questions at the start of Farmlink, and the most common question was just why? Because we knew nothing, and a lot of the things that didn't initially make sense to us, we asked why. And the conclusion we came to is that that's the way it's always been, should never be an answer to the question why.
Yeah.
And often the greatest solutions and the strongest ideas that Farmlink came up with came when someone in the industry said, well, that's the way it's always been. And focusing on those areas were the places we started and the places we continue to dive deeper into.
I love it. Keep asking why. Mike, I feel like you're underplaying your role here a little bit.
Mike always talks about Farmlink and says, you guys or these young kids.
Because I'm not young anymore, obviously, but I do want to say that mentors played such a huge role in my life, and I'm forever, ever grateful to them. And I want to talk to you a little bit about that. You're gaining so much being a mentor. I'm gonna cry. You're gaining so much being a mentor, I'm sure, but you're giving so much back to these wonderful young folks.
Can I just say before Mike answers, I had to be in Texas for a few different events last March, and Mike said, come live on my ranch, and in 3 weeks I'll teach you what it would take to learn in a year in ag school. And he had me, I'd love it to give a round of applause to Mike. And I wanted to bring my dog, so I drove out to Texas from LA. And within an hour of getting here, he had me at a boot barn. And within an hour after that, he had me on a horse for the first time. And within a week, he had me up at 5 a.m. herding cattle with a bunch of cowboys. And I did not belong there. But Mike has been such a mentor. And there's not a single person at Farmlink who's my age or above his that wouldn't say they learned so much from him every single day. So you can answer that question now.
Okay, well, that's nice. No, and he did great. He did great. And okay, this is what I would tell you. It's like how to get involved, right? Okay, unfortunately, it's my generation, the baby boomers, that is leaving y'all all of this mess. We did not inherit this mess. We did not inherit a planet that was polluted. We did not inherit incredible debt, and we didn't fix it. Okay, so I have thought for about 30 years, I'm gonna do my small part on the ranch and try not to add to the problems. But I would urge y'all to get involved, because you're gonna be involved anyway. And that's kind of the bad news. The climate is changing rapidly. You've heard a lot of brilliant people up here today talk about how they're adjusting their agriculture to the challenges that they face. And I'm thinking that y'all are here today because you want to be involved. And then just be like these guys. Just jump in, and you will find friends. And if you can't find friends, call us, and we will be your friend.
I don't know what else more to say. These people inspire me more than I can ever tell you. I am so proud of just knowing you both and the work that you've been able to do over the last several years. Thank you for being here. Thank you for sharing abundance with us. Please give them a round of applause. So we just have a couple more panels before we have a full screening of the documentary Common Ground, which you heard a little bit about earlier, followed by a discussion with the filmmakers behind it. So please stay with us. There's food, there's drink. You really can't leave. I won't let you. I'll stop you. There's cocktails, everyone, cocktails. I want to thank some of our other in-kind partners for making this reception possible, including Swig Cheese House, Nyman Ranch, Tarali, Simply, Farmhouse Delivery, Riverence Trout, Beans' House, Certified Origins, Wyman's Makers, Mark, everyone, and Bonterra Organic Vineyards. Please give it up for all of these companies and their amazing staff who have made today possible. You've been hydrated, you've been fed. I can't thank them enough for being here.